Hello, my name is Thomas and welcome to this latest in the Alphabet series, the Alphabet of Britishness. Today I'm looking at J, and J is for justice, but before I get started on that, I left the last podcast, the last Alphabet episode, on a bit of a cliffhanger. I said, what does I stand for? And I said, it's up to you, because I had so many interesting and different and competing ideas, from I is for isolationism to I is for international, I is for imperial, I is for isolated island. So I did leave it to you to decide. First of all, I did a poll in the Facebook group Britain, People, Places and Pastimes. Now has 11,000 members, and they took part in the poll. So I initially put in maybe international, imperial, isolated island, India and Ireland, and these were the most popular answers when I first asked the question. Some people added in some extra. Again, I'm only using first names for the Facebook group just because I feel this is, often people's personal accounts and they might not be so happy with having the full name read out. But it was Darren who suggested Industrial Revolution, a gentleman named Martin suggested inventiveness, Alice suggested integrated, but overwhelmingly the favourite was international/imperial. With just 5 votes, they're fairly evenly spread. 4 votes for Industrial Revolution, 3 votes for inventiveness, 1 for isolated island, 1 for India, 1 for integrated. No one for Ireland, which is interesting because quite a few people had messaged me privately or put it in that Facebook group saying I is for Ireland. But in the event, in the poll, I say it got nil point, no points. So I took it from there, and then I put it into my Instagram, which again is where I'm getting a lot of the ideas from, my Fleming Never Dies Instagram account. And there, first of all, I gave people a 50-50 choice. That's the way the voting works there. International, imperial, or industrial revolution. And it was 18 votes to 11. So 62% thought international, imperial, only 38% thought industrial revolution. Inventiveness or isolated, again just sorting them into whichever pairs, and it was 23 to 9. So again 72% thought inventiveness. Then it was international or imperial or inventiveness, and that was 18 to 3. So again 86% thought international or imperial. So finally I asked, okay, is it international or is it imperial? And 112 people saw this vote. 9 people voted for international and 40 people voted for imperial. So imperial wins. I is for imperial, with 40 votes from Instagram, 5 votes from Facebook, so it is 45 votes overall for I is for imperial, beating anything else by a very, very, very long way. Which is interesting and surprising for me. As I say, at the time when I was doing I, it seemed so evenly split, so all over the place. I found it very difficult to work out what most people thought. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this as a research piece into perceptions. What do people believe about their country? What do people believe about the United Kingdom, wherever they're from? So again, this week I asked in the Facebook group Britain, People, Places and Pastimes. This is a group about lifestyle, culture, history, humour, food, facts, and anything related to Great Britain, so it seemed a good place to ask. I asked, in the Alphabet of Britishness, what does J stand for? And I got 152 answers on Facebook. And again on Instagram I got 23. So again, just at time of recording, because these groups are still busy, but I've got 175 answers. I'm going to go through as many as I can. Some are the same, some people did double up, but there were also people who responded to other people's answers. So I've got a conversation of well over 200 comments running on these 2 apps. I say sometimes I was asking people, can you elaborate and answer a bit more? And some of them I just really enjoyed. I want to tell them straight away. So I was commenting on them there. And of course on Instagram, I've got an ongoing conversation there. So on Instagram it's Fleming Never Dies. So, I have quite a lot of J. I'm going to try and power through them as best as I can. Starting off with a suggestion that's not from Facebook and not from Instagram. It's just from a personal friend of mine, Ian in Shenzhen, suggested James. James the First, or James the Sixth of Scotland, the man who became king and practically united England and Scotland under one ruler. So it's an important shift for both nations, and it's one that still shapes our identity to this day. James was the only son of Mary, Queen of Scots. He's the nephew to Queen Elizabeth, and an interesting king. So he became king. These two countries, England and Scotland, which have historically fought against each other, became united, not through a war, not through a takeover, but just by, well, a Scottish king ended up being the rightful heir of the English king, English throne, and he was accepted. So it is interesting that this very peaceful process united the two countries, Scotland and England. He's an interesting fella. He's certainly a very, very bright, intelligent man. Studied Greek, French, Latin, made good use of a wide range of classical and religious writings. His education aroused in him literary ambitions rarely found in princes, but I think it's the Encyclopedia Britannica has to admit it also tended to make him a pedant. He is King James, and of course that's something that a lot of people associate with the Bible, the King James V Bible, which is interesting. I've once heard it said that King James himself didn't particularly like this very, very popular edition of the Bible. Again, I was talking to my friend Kane in Fuzhou, as many of you know. You've heard the previous podcast, but he was commenting that this is the only Bible he's heard of where people are adamant that this is the right one, perhaps apart from the Latin Bible read in some Catholic churches still today, but there are societies all around the King James Bible. But it is an extraordinary document, but he himself is said to have disliked it. He thought it was written in the language of the common farmer, which kind of suggests that he did get out and about and did know how the general populace spoke. But I find that fascinating. And as I say, the thing that's most attached to his name, he personally might not have been so keen on. And of course, if we have the era of James I, we don't call it the Jamesian era, we call it the Jacobean era, which of course comes from the Latin name for James, which is Jacobus. So this was something that a regular contributor, somebody often sends me really good ideas about what to include in this podcast, Kid Bond fan on Instagram. He suggested this, and again, it's a characteristic, of something relating to the era of James I. So it could be, say, the furniture style, characterised by the use of dark brown carved oak furniture, or in literature, some of Shakespeare's most prominent plays include King Lear, the Scottish play The Tempest, which were written in the times of King James I. In fact, I have to say, the Scottish play is very, very interesting, because of course we all remember Banquo, who is completely innocent of any of the wrongdoings in the play, and of course is a ghost at the feast. But these are real people, and there's a real question over his innocence. But I understand that Shakespeare had to write that Banquo was completely innocent, because of course there's the line, your sons will become heirs hereafter, and of course they did. So there is a relationship between the Stuart household and Banquo. Fascinating how, again, the Jacobean era is associated with, furniture, Shakespeare, the Bible. It's a very, vibrant cultural time. And that's, again, something related. 4 people, Stephen, Brian, Mike and Paula, who all suggested Juliet. J is for Juliet. I assume as in Romeo and Juliet, so I'm going to just tie that into James I, the Jacobean era, Shakespeare, and say that's been done. Again, we had lots and lots of suggestions. One of the ones that got lots of kind of reactions within the Facebook group was Jam and Jerusalem. So Teresa suggested that with kind of 4 likes, reactions. Rosalind, Jane also mentioned it. And I wondered, how common is this phrase? So if I wanted to know that, I could just kind of reflect in my own life whenever when has anyone ever said that to me? I guess I could ask my friends, I could ask the Facebook group and Instagram, as I do for many things, but what I decided to do is actually go to a serious database. I went to the BYU corpus, that's Brigham Young University, and this is corpus data. So they analyse language, analyse text from all around the English-speaking world. And this is a fascinating way, because obviously I've included unusual English phrases before. I think it was crikey or blimey, where I said in a podcast, I've never said this, I don't know who says this, and I started to get messages from people saying, oh, I use this, I live in the South Coast. We all live in our own little worlds. That's why it's fascinating. There's a whole academic study on frequency of use, of who uses this, where is it used. So I looked at the corpus of global web-based English, Jam and Jerusalem, the frequency of use was 4 in the UK, which, to put in context, it was 1 in Australia and 0 in the rest of the world. That doesn't mean it's only been used 4 times in existence, but within its whole database, which is extraordinary and extensive. There are only kind of 5 good examples of it being used. One was from the Independent newspaper, one's from the Guardian newspaper, and there are 2 others from minor kind of blogs, and all 4 of them were talking about the Women's Institute, which is, I guess, the traditional idea. Jerusalem is a hymn they may commonly sing at the Women's Institute. I wouldn't know. I'm a man, as you may have guessed. And jam making is kind of one of their traditional hobbies. But interesting, the Independent newspaper had this interesting quote: "The charity has become a formidable campaigning force since shedding its traditional Jam and Jerusalem image when the then Prime Minister Tony Blair was humiliated by a slow hand clap at the Women's Institute annual conference in the year 2000. The years since have seen it mount successful campaigns on issues ranging from library closures to reforms to the government's legal aid bill." So that's interesting. It's really showing the change in the Women's Institute from how it used to be to how it is now as a force, a campaigning force. So again, definitely a very British phrase. As I say, I'm looking at the corpus of global web-based English, and I'll touch on this database again, just to see, it's not like there's words that only we use and nobody else uses it, but it's interesting to see the frequency of use. With most common English words, I'd expect it to see, more used in the United States, simply because of its larger population, and there's more stuff on the internet from the United States as a result of that. So when you see something being used more in the UK than in the US, well, it really speaks volumes of how British it is. And if I just went with the word jam, wow. So on Facebook, Julie, Sylvia, Sam, Michelle, Clive and Erica all suggested jam. Tricia suggested jam butty. Sally Ann suggested jam as in not jelly, as in used in the USA. So let's get into this. What is jam? Well, if you're American, and I believe about a third of listeners are based in the United States, so jam in the United Kingdom is called jelly in the USA, and what we call jelly in the UK is called jello in the United States. Those are the broad definitions, but I have to say, having tried UK jam or American jelly, they do seem a bit different to me. I'd say the American jelly is a lot sweeter, and most English jams have a lot more of the fruit content. So when Eileen in the Facebook group was suggesting jam making, I think she was really talking about, again, what Americans call jelly and we call jam. I made some jam recently, and I have to say it's been a very, very pleasurable thing just to make my own jam. So even though the Women's Institute might be shedding its Jam and Jerusalem image, I have to say I love the song Jerusalem, which I'll talk about later. I love making jam. It's become a big joy for me recently. So yeah, Pam suggested jelly or jam sandwich, happily encompassing British and American listeners. Whilst on Facebook, Julie, Matthew, Christine, Janet and Maggie all suggested jelly, which again for American listeners is jello. And Spies in Ties on Instagram suggested The Jam, described on their own website as a 3-piece rock group from Woking, who between 1977 and 1982 released an incredible array of music. In the UK there were 5 albums, 17 singles, a stack of number ones, and a journey which encompassed no end of influences, styles and textures. So, I'm afraid for copyright reasons, I will not be playing music. I'd love to have some kind of music I'm allowed to play. So if anyone has some some homemade music they'd like to send me and they don't mind me using it, I'd love to. The music at the beginning, by the way, which has replaced the previous theme tune I was using, the music at the beginning is copyrighted me, because that's me playing it. Oh, I hope it's okay. I hope you like it. Again, sticking with spies in ties, he suggested J is for John Bull. Now, I must admit I haven't seen many John Bull cartoons or much uses of John Bull, but he was a traditional kind of image of the UK. So he first appeared as a series of political satires by, I'm going to try and say this right, John Arbuthnot. Arbuthnot, I think, is a family name I've only seen in Murder on the Orient Express. But John Arbuthnot lived between 1667 and 1735. He was a Scottish scientist, doctor, and political satirist, and his series of John Bull pamphlets, The History of John Bull, introduced him as a typical Englishman, honest, plain-dealing fellow, bold, and of very inconstant temper. Funnily enough, I think of it as more from the Punch magazines. So he appeared as a cartoon, I think in 1762, as other caricature engravers incorporate John Bull into their work. So he's normally a kind of a stout man in a tailcoat with breeches and a Union flag waistcoat, dressed, as you might imagine from its invention in the Regency period outfits. He wears a low topper, sometimes called a John Bull topper, on his head, and is accompanied by a bulldog, and I guess the bulldog has later on become more the symbol of the UK. So he's described, I've been looking at various sources, described as a drinking man, hard-headed, down-to-earth, averse to intellectualism, fond of dogs, horses, ale, and country sports. I wonder if a modern encapsulation of John Bull is actually Al Murray, the pub landlord. So he's an interesting character. There is, I found this super interesting, there's a real John Bull, who was one of the most distinguished English keyboard players in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, who then ran away to the Netherlands to avoid various charges, including adultery, levelled at him in England. But anyway, John Bull, the original, wrote keyboard compositions, the best known of which is The King's Hunt, and is kind of regarded as the composer of God Save the King. Fascinating. A group of people on Facebook, Norman, Carmen, Pamela, Ross, Kev, Judith, Heather, all suggested J is for joyful. And what can I say beyond that? In the Alphabet of Britishness, we're joyful. I kind of like that. In the previous episode, we were suggesting that the English are, or the British are, introspective, but we can also be quite joyful. We're a mixed bunch. Excuse me as I take a sip of my Earl Grey tea. Right, I said earlier that I'll talk about the hymn Jerusalem. So on the Facebook group, Darren suggested this and got seven likes. And then Mick, Jenny, Andy also kind of chipped in. Andy specifying it the hymn, which got 3 likes. So what is it? What is this hymn? Again, I'm not including audio tracks that I don't have the copyright to. The text by William Blake is about the legend that Jesus might have travelled with Joseph of Arimathea to England. In fact, to be precise, to Glastonbury. And it was included as a patriotic poem in a 1916 collection for the country then, of course, in the grip of the First World War. And it immediately caught the eye of a choral composer, Hubert Parry. And Parry was more than happy at the suggestion of the poet laureate Robert Bridges to set it to music, simply calling it Jerusalem. And it's a firm favourite today. As I said, it's a traditional feature of Women's Institute meetings. A lot of people regard it as the unofficial English anthem, not a British anthem, but an English anthem. Now, the music that the music is performed to is normally in the arrangement that Elgar wrote for the Leeds Festival in 1922. Parry having just died 4 years earlier, so this reorchestration was Elgar's way of paying tribute to his fellow composer. So I find this wonderful that it's been touched by many, many hands. But the original poem by William Blake, I'm not going to sing it, but I'm very happy to read it out. And did those feet, in ancient times, walk upon England's mountains green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? and did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills, and was Jerusalem builded here, among those dark satanic mills. Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire. Bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. So that is Jerusalem by the poet William Blake. Another sip of my tea before I continue to the one that has attracted the most love, which is justice. So, who suggested this one? Thank you very much to Judith, Patricia, Heidi, Cynthia, Marlene, Pauline, Jenny, Stephen, Sarah, and to Ray, who put judiciary, British justice, undoubtedly a bulkwood of British life and liberty, and Jenny, who suggested actually many, Jubilee, Jerusalem, justice, jolly, and jurisprudence. And again, people just put the single word apart from Ray. So I was kind of thinking about this quite a lot. So I felt it was in two parts, really. The first was probably fair play, and the second was the justice system itself. I feel really it's the concept of justice, and then it's the inaction of justice. So what is fair play? Here I was bearing into the website Quora, where there's intermittent questions about Britishness. What is Britishness? What is one of the questions was, what do Brits mean by fair play, as they say it often? And there's a lovely answer from a lady, Christina Stinton, who studied a BA in History and Classics at the University of London. She wrote a couple of years ago now that fair play comes from the British ideal of playing sports fairly in public schools, based loosely on the chivalric notions of abiding by the rules and challenges. Playing sports was supposed to encourage fair competition and teamwork within the rules, and thus were set up for adulthood. We then went on to invent or write up the rules for just about every major competitive sport in Europe along these lines, and it's really been mostly associated with cricket. So we can say playing the game, fair play, or if you're not playing to the rules, just not cricket. So I thought that was a very interesting take, that it comes from public schools, that it comes from the idea of knights, that really perhaps could be tied into the concept of gentlemanliness that I talked about in the episode for G. But if it is the justice system, well, I went direct to the website for the British justice system, the official website for our legal system. So I'm taking a lot of their data here, a lot of the information right there. And it says the UK has 3 separate legal systems, one each for England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and this reflects the historic origins and the fact that Scotland and Ireland and later Northern Ireland retain their own legal systems and traditions under the Acts of the Union 1707 and 1800. Again, interesting point there that England and Scotland were kind of united under James I anyway, but it took time for that to become like a real union of the two nations, not just being under the same king. Anyway, the justice system is one of 3 branches of the state. The other 2 branches, executive, or the government, the legislature, which is the 2 houses of lords. That is relatively standard around the world. But, and this is what I find interesting, often in the English language you teach a rule, here's a load of exceptions. Well, here we have an English concept, the separation of the 3 powers, but in reality they do overlap within our constitution, which is probably a fact that our constitution has slowly evolved over time as a series of practices rather than being a specific document. And there are very few countries in the world that don't have a written constitution. So what are these oddities? Well, for example, the government is made up of members of parliament and peers who are also members of the executive and legislature. Until the end of the 19th century, judges could be elected as MPs, and in some rare cases, judges, such as the Lord Chief Justice, would serve as members of the cabinet and thus be members of the government. So a member of the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. Over the centuries, many figures have served as Lord Chancellor, and they include Thomas à Becket, Cardinal Wolsey, Thomas More, Francis Bacon, and the Lord Chancellor's office is the clearest example of how the British Constitution did not separate and in fact mixes the 3 branches of the state together. There have been attempts to reform it, and one of the interesting things is that every time they try and separate them out to make it clearer, by removing one piece you start to move all the other pieces and change the balance. So it's often been very, very difficult to make these changes. I feel I have to touch on Scotland again, because Scotland has a very unusual, let's say, oddity. I feel there's no other word for it, oddity. It's the only European country to have 3 outcomes in a criminal case: guilty, not guilty, and not proven. So this kind of emphasises the burden on the state that they must prove beyond reasonable doubt. There have been attempts to change this, to get rid of the not proven verdict. There was an attempt in 2016. I was reading an article from the Scottish Legal News. Thomas Ross, president of the Scottish Criminal Bar Association, told them, "If Scotland has devised a safeguard against the possibility of wrongful convictions that other countries have not thought of or have considered and rejected, then the Scottish Criminal Bar Association does not apologise for this fact. We celebrate it." So the uniqueness of the Scottish legal system has been defended successfully about 5 years ago. It is a very, very unusual thing. Again, sip of the tea. Just one person suggested this, but I liked it so much I'm definitely including it. On Facebook, a lady named Suzanne suggested J is for Jackanory. So that was a BBC TV show, a children's show that ran from 1965 to 1996. The title comes from an old English nursery rhyme. I'll tell you a story about Jackanory, and now my story has begun. I'll tell you another of Jack and his brother, and now my story is done. In this TV show, Jackanory, the presenter, sits in an armchair reading a story, and then often there's illustrations, cartoons, the illustrations by Quentin Blake, who of course illustrated the Roald Dahl books, particularly memorable and loved. And who do they have just sitting in a chair reading these stories? We have Tom Baker, famous for playing Doctor Who, Alan Bennett, Helen Bonham Carter, Richard Briers, Judi Dench. I think a lot of listeners may know her as M from James Bond. Angus Dayton, the early presenter of Have I Got News For You. Lenny Henry, John Hurt, Big Brother Is Watching You. Roy Kinnear, who's the father of Rory Kinnear, who plays Tanner in the more recent Bond films. Art Malik, of course, was a great character in The Living Daylights. Ian McKellen, Gandalf. Liam Neeson, Michael Palin of Monty Python's Flying Circus fame, Patrick Stewart, Make It So, and a fella named HRH, the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, who read his own book, The Old Man of Loch Nagar, and it was adapted with an animation with Robbie Coltrane voicing the Hermit and Prince Charles as the narrator. Prince Charles, whatever happened to him? Great on Jackanory, though. Honestly, this might be my recommended rabbit hole for this episode. Can you look up some of the great readings of Jackanory? That was really, really cool. Anyway, I'm going to carry on to Jubilee. Again, this was another popular one. On Facebook, it was Michelle, Karen, Teresa, Jenny, Claire, Phil, and on Instagram, a gentleman named Patrick, who again, this seemed to be a private account, so I'm not reading out his full name, and a gentleman whose full handle I will read out, Easy Smiles and Expensive Watches. I got a really, really good suggestion from them, which is Jubilee. So, funnily enough, I went to again, an official website just to look up what is a Jubilee. So I went to www.royal.uk/history-jubilees, and it said a royal jubilee is an occasion to celebrate the life and reign of a monarch, and a significant event which is celebrated around the world. And although the concept of the jubilee began in biblical times, today the term is most closely associated with the royal family. But then it talks a great deal about the biblical significance. In the New Testament, Jesus presents himself as the one who brings the old Jubilee to completion because he has come to preach the year of the Lord's favour. That's in Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 2. In the Roman Catholic Church, Jubilees began to be celebrated formally in 1300 AD and are years of forgiveness of sins and reconciliation. They're celebrated every 25 years, and the most recent year of Jubilee was the year 2000. Royal Jubilees celebrate significant periods in monarchs' reigns and the national life, and few British monarchs have achieved reigns of 50 years, and golden jubilees are very, very rare. There have been few records of how, if at all, Henry III Edward III and James VI and first have celebrated their 50-year milestones. The first British monarch to mark 50 years on the throne in a significant way was George III, and then followed by Queen Victoria. So the current Queen had her significant Jubilee celebrations in 1977 for a Silver Jubilee, in 2002 for a Golden Jubilee, and in 2012 for her Diamond Jubilee. Of course, as part of the celebrations for the Silver Jubilee was a special Jackanory episode where Jubilee Bear was read out by Dame Judi Dench, now Dame. You can find that on YouTube. It's great fun. Again, just one person suggested this, but it's something I really, really like, so I want to have a look at this. On Facebook, Michael suggested Just a Minute, which is a radio show on BBC Radio 4, first broadcast on the 22nd of December 1967. It's a game show, a panel show. The object of the game is for panellists to talk for 60 seconds on a given subject without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. Fabulous show that you can listen to now around the world thanks to the BBC's global reach. Nicholas Parsons hosted the show for almost 52 years and then was succeeded by Sue Perkins, who you may know from the Great British Bake Off or the Great British Baking Show, depending where you are in the world and what title you know it by. So there's been 87 series of Just a Minute. That's 963 episodes in total. Again, going to something quite popular. On Facebook, Peter, and on Instagram, Will Johnson. Matt Spacer of Bondsuits.com suggested a Jaguar. Again, depending where you're in the world, either it's Jaguar or Jaguar. It's the luxury vehicle brand of Jaguar Land Rover, which was originally founded in 1922 to make motorcycle sidecars, then moved to developing bodies, and this just seemed to go from strength to strength. But funny that they initially made sidecars and now make luxury cars. They've come a long way in 99 years. On Facebook, John and Sarah suggested Jeeves. Of course, in the wonderful books by P.G. Wodehouse is Bertie Wooster's Gentleman's Gentleman, and I've been watching Jeeves and Wooster, the wonderful TV show with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie, and it's been fantastic, fantastic fun to watch this classic series. For foods, goodness me, Roland Hume, who I interviewed a short while ago, the British writer living in the USA, and Deirdre in the Facebook group suggested Jaffa Cakes. So this might be the next vote. Are Jaffa Cakes a biscuit or are they a cake? Bond on a budget. And on Facebook, Rosemary and Stephen suggested Jammy Dodgers, and Hannah suggested Jam Tart. Quite like, there's been quite a few food suggestions, and all very sweet foods. Pamela on Facebook got 3 reactions as she suggested Jabberwocky. J is for Jabberwocky. That's the poem by Lewis Carroll, full of nonsense words. And quite a few people, Patricia, Tez suggested Johnny Walker, Tina suggested James's Irish Whiskey, and Bond on a Budget suggesting the British writer Jane Austen. But he also suggested Jack the Ripper, and it's been in the news recently. I was looking up a news article from Time Out magazine. It was published on 18th of August 2021. It has this great kind of opening paragraph. If you went to a British secondary school, there are 3 things you can probably remember from history class. Henry VIII had 6 wives, Neville Chamberlain got off a plane waving a piece of paper, and that Jack the Ripper was the most notorious serial killer in Victorian London. Love it. Shows our priorities in teaching history. And the news? Well, East End chippy Jack the Chipper recently opened its second store in Greenwich, and it didn't go down well. So members of the public boycotted the business and say the pun-named food joint is glamorising violence against women, as the negative reaction has been so severe that the owner, Recep Turhan, said the shop might have to close. He talked to the Sun newspaper and said they were historical events. I wasn't celebrating what he did. It's just a play on words. It's not like this is a murderer from last year. It's a name we chose and it's a brand now. And Turhan adds that he will not bow to public pressure to change his business's name. Instead, he plans to show his respect for women by offering them a 50% discount. Not too bad. I talked about New topic. I talked about the frequency of use of certain terms. Yvonne in the Facebook group got 3 reactions, and she suggested jumble sale. So again, I just wanted to look at the frequency of use. So if you have 107, I don't know why it comes up with this number, but 107 uses of the word jumble sale around the world. In the United States, jumble sale is used once. In Hong Kong, it's used twice. Ireland 5 times. Australia 5 times. New Zealand once. And in Great Britain, 73 times. I think we can all agree that this is a very British term, a jumble sale. I must admit, I'm not sure, a car boot sale, a jumble sale, a sale of old goods in your front yard. You can find a lot of, let's say, treasure at a jumble sale. Again, 3 people on Facebook, Debs, Rosemary, Roxanne, suggested jolly hockey sticks. And again, look at frequency of use. If it's used 12 times around the world, that's once in the United States, 3 times in Australia, but 8 times in Great Britain. So then I was looking again, it's been used in the Telegraph, Daily Mail, Guardian, various blogs, and that's in the United Kingdom. So let's just read a couple of the context quotes. Gould was also keen the children didn't sound too jolly hockey sticks, micro celebs and their jolly hockey sticks good friends. It was, she says with another laugh, absolutely jolly hockey sticks. Come on girls, jolly hockey sticks, etc. These are just the uses. If we have a look at the Oxford English Dictionary definition, it says it means boisterous enthusiasm. It's used as an exclamation in humorous representations or imitations of a manner of speech associated with English public schools expressing, boisterous enthusiasm. The phrase is said to have been coined by actress Beryl Reid on the British radio comedy series Educating Archie from 1950 to 1958, and Cambridge Dictionary says used to describe a woman or girl of high class who's enthusiastic in a way that annoys most people. I find it funny, it seems to be mainly coming from satire of the upper classes, and when I looked at the Australian context, it is actually again from blogs, theatre productions, being used in a very similar way. Perhaps in another vein of it being used in a word being used in a satirical sense is the term jingoism. So 2 gentlemen, James and Michael, suggested this. Now it's surprisingly old, surprising for me. The Oxford English Dictionary first record of jingo is in 1694, and it's a minced oath for Jesus. In the same way OG in the United States, I guess. But I really associate it with MacDermot's war song. Here I'm taking a sip of my tea again. MacDermot's war song, which is from 1878, so it's sang by G.H. MacDermot, the singer, and George William Hurt, the songwriter, and it's a music hall number about the war going on at the time between England, France, Turkey, and Russia. And it goes something like this. We don't want to fight, but by jingo if we do, we've got the ships, we've got the men, we've got the money too. We've fought the bear before, and while we're Britain's true, the Russians shall not have Constantinople. Funnily enough, when Mussolini was threatening to invade Abyssinia in 1935, Punch published a parody. We don't want to fight, but by jingo if you do, we will probably issue a joint memorandum suggesting a mild disapproval of you. And Terry Pratchett directly references the original song in his Discworld book, Jingo. We have no ships, we have no men, we have no money too. So jingoism. Yeah, again, a kind of satirical phrase. I'm looking into the linguistics and perhaps I'm being influenced by Kid Bond fan suggesting J is for J.R.R. Tolkien. He was, of course, Professor of Anglo-Saxon Studies, worked for a time at the Oxford English Dictionary, which I keep quoting here, and, of course, is the author of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Again, if I'm looking deep at the frequency of use, one of the most popular phrases being used in English was jolly good. Again, on Instagram, 007 Islander, British Bond fan. On Facebook, Stephen, Delmer. Again on Instagram, Michael 007. Jolly by itself, being suggested by a lady named Molly. And various collocations, show, jolly good show, jolly good try, jolly good idea, jolly good time, jolly good day out, jolly good fellow, or just by itself, jolly. So jolly good. It is used in the United States, it is used in New Zealand. again, looking at the corpus data, it tracked 645 uses of jolly good, 55 out of 645 in the United States, 9 in Canada, 27 in Ireland, 38, but overwhelmingly 280 uses in Great Britain. So again, a small country punching its weight in the use of the word jolly good, and much the same for jolly japes. Oh dear. Now, quite a lot of people did ask me if I would talk about James Bond. The Style is Not Enough asked me on Instagram. Daniel Gaster on Instagram, and you can find him on the From Taylor to Love blog as well. Kid Bond fan suggested this, and on Facebook, Teresa. Back on Instagram, Aussie Bond Guy suggested, and 007_HMSS suggested James. So quite a lot of people suggested James Bond on Facebook. Mike said Juliet Bravo, which in the NATO phonemic alphabet is JB, so I suggest that's James Bond. But I'm not sure if we have time for it, just as when F was for Fleming, I didn't really have time to go into it, so I might save this for later. We might have an episode coming up more focused on James Bond. Aussie Bond Guy suggested John Lennon, and It's Jonah Davis suggested Jumper and John Smedley. Pete Brooker from Taylors of Love suggested Jumper, and again, 2 people on Facebook, Laura and Graham. And Jumpers for Goalposts was suggested by Karen on Facebook. Happy childhood memories for us all. So, thank you to everybody who messaged me and gave me your suggestions, and now you've heard all of the suggestions that I had time for. I hope you enjoyed them, and let me know which one you found the most interesting out of all of these. And again, help me out with the music, but I'd love to make this more interesting, better and better, you know? Every day in every way, I'm trying to get better and better. So again, thank you so much to everyone who messaged me, gave me your suggestions, voted on the polls. This podcast is, well, I'm the voice, but you're the ones creating it. And thank you to everybody who's been sharing it, has been finding more and more new people. So every time you like an episode, or you share an episode, or you tell your friends about it, however you do it, if you write a review on iTunes, this really, really helps new people find it. People have been doing so, and people have been finding this for the first time. So again, thank you so much to everybody who's been reviewing, liking, sharing, but most especially for giving me such wonderful, wonderful ideas and helping me on my little bit journey as I try and work out what is Britishness. Well, just this one letter, I feel J, is very definitely for justice. Thank you.